Hello, this video is for beginners who are interested in seeing how AI videos can be generated based on a reference video in Stable Diffusion and Automatic 1111. These are example results that we will create in this video and show how to compose them in Davinci Resolve. Now, no matter what you do in Stable Diffusion, you cannot completely stop flickering or inconsistency, but you can reduce it by understanding what to expect from Stable Diffusion and what can help produce better results. We will see that there is no specific one setting that works for all, and that settings must be selected and adjusted based on your video and understanding of this process. If you want to create impressive real-world videos, then best results are achieved when you train your own checkpoint. But it's a time-consuming process, so we will not be using it and use existing checkpoints and LoRAs. We will be using the simplest and most effective method, which is image to image, and not rely on extensions such as deform, temporal kit, move to move, or others, because it's effective, easy to use, and gives us more control. So we choose a video. We can select some of the free websites such as FreePic. You can also have Pixels, Pixabay. So all of these contain free videos or images that we can use in the video to obtain a suitable video. So we can see here, for example, in FreePic, we can see a lot of the green screen videos. So it's better to choose a video with a green screen or a simple background. This will make it easier to separate the subject from the background later on, because most likely we need to do this separation to produce a more complicated video. Now, it's better to have a simple background, to have consistent clothing. That would be even better, such as jeans or simple clothing. This will make the animation smoother. It's also possible to have a blurry background that makes the separation also better. But if it's difficult to separate the background from the foreground, the produced video will have more flickering. For example, if we choose this video, for instance, we download it to our computer. For example, using Davinci Resolve, we create a new project, call it, for instance, dancing video, test, create. Now, if I want to produce a different frame rate, I start a new project, for example. Now, the resolution, I want something like 720 by 720, or can change it to 768. Okay, to have 768. I can change the frame rate from this location. Now here we have limited number of frame rates. Now in Photoshop I can choose a specific number of frame rates. For example, if I want to choose to make an anime, then 16 frames per second is more than enough. Now in Photoshop I can reduce this value even further. Okay, and now I drag and drop the file. For example, we put it here. I don't want to change the frame rate because I still want it to be 16 frames per second. We can see that the original file has the same dimension. Now I want to make it a square, like I've said. So we want to produce PNG files. Okay, this is the file size and the frame rate of 16. So we can produce an anime style video, and to reduce the time needed to complete the processing and the generation. Add to render queue and start. So we can see that the production is very quick in Davinci Resolve. Now we come to this folder and you can see that all the frames have been generated with a proper sequence. Now, if you can't see noise multiplier for image to image in your Automatic 1111, you go to settings, we'll go to user interface. This is user interface. Now in this section, quick settings, you come here and you say something like, you write noise multiplier, image noise, initial noise multiplier, image color correction. So we add this, okay, then apply and restart. This will show up. Next, if it's not down to 0, you have to right mouse click this area and click inspect. Once you get inspect, you get a value here like 0.5. You just write it down 0. Then once again to this slider, right mouse click it and inspect and set the value down to 0. Okay, then you will be able to reduce it down to 0. Now in this example, I'll be using Ghibli style. Okay, I'll be using this setting. Add some details. I'll be removing the headphones and use 0.5 denoising strength. For this reason, we need to use multiple control nets in order to improve the results. I'll be using normal and openpose. Now, regarding which control nets to use, usually this is experimental. So we need to experiment and see which is better. So in my case, I think that openpose would give me acceptable results with DW openpose for the fingers or the location of the hands, and the normal map could help in mapping the scene in general along with the person, because I think this is suitable. We can add more control nets, but that's not guaranteed to produce better results, and might make the pictures more strict. Once we see a suitable, for example, a suitable seed, we can fix it, for instance. Hopefully this would help us to produce more consistent results. I would also use enable after detailer and with a strength of 0.3 for the inpainting process with full strength for the LoRA. And we can generate a batch processing for this like this. So we can generate the batch and check the results. Now, when we check the results of the generated images, we can see that they look very consistent. Okay. Now there's a problem that I don't like this background, so I prefer to remove the background and actually work with the subject alone separately. Okay. So to remove the background, I would go once again to automatic 1111. That can be done in the Davinci Resolve as well using Magic Mask, but I can do it also in automatic 1111. This can be useful sometimes and can be more accurate as well. So by going to extras, now I have installed an extension called background removal. So this is the extension that I have installed for him. So now we can go to extras, batch from directory, because I want to remove all the backgrounds for all my generated images. I choose the source folder and destination folder where I would put the removed background images here. Now for the size, I don't want to change the size. I just want to produce the images as they are, just remove the background. And I can use, for example, general use is very useful and very accurate. We can also use human segment, but I find that general use actually is very effective. We can also use anime, since this is an anime type. Then press generate. Now after we're done, we can see that these are the generated background removed images. Okay, I think this is very useful and very accurate. Now, if we drag the output folder, which contains the PNG files, we can see, for example, in this project settings, the settings include 60 frames per second, while the frames here are only 16 frames per second. And so it's kind of very quick, very fast, okay? So if I drag the original PNG files as well, okay, and align them together, we can see that, for example, and put this one down here, and this one in the location here, we can see that both of them are very fast. So we can do something like change the speed or use time recontrol. Okay, retime controls. Sorry, we can increase this here. So we can change the speed, for example, to get something like 50%. Okay. Retime controls, we can change into something like 50%. So if we think that this speed is suitable for our work, okay, we accept it. If not, we can change the speed, okay, like this, for example. Okay, this looks better. Now we can also change the speed, for instance. Now, regarding the retime controls, we can also change the retime process. Now, this is how the frames will be filled. So we have 16 frames inside a 16 inside a 60 frames video. So the frames in between will be generated based on project settings. This looks good enough for me, okay? But sometimes we might change the results and use something like optical flow, which might help to make the video slightly smoother, okay? So the use of optical flow could actually make the results sometimes better. Sometimes the project's default settings is more than enough. So to change the clip speed, once again, we can right mouse click on a clip, for example, like this, and change clip speed. For instance, instead of 50, we can use something like 40%. So we can see that the clip did not change in terms of size. So I can drag it up here, change clip speed to 40. I want it 40. And stretch it to make it even slower. So we can change the clip speed based on our results. Now, in order to reduce the flickering of a video, we use Davinci Resolve. Okay, we can see that it flickers. The background is flickery. So in order to, we use Alt and drag on top so that we can have a comparison between the original and the video that we want to reduce its flickering. So in the Edit tab, we just go to deflicker, this deflicker. We click on OpenFX, deflicker, and just drag and drop onto the video. Now this opens, we have to change this here to OpenFX, it's better, okay? Now we click on the video that we added deflicker to it. Now deflickering will reduce the flickering of the video. Now if we compare the two videos, you can see that the one to the right has less flickering. This is very clear from this side of the image. Now here we have less flickering than this location than here, okay? So we can add multiple deflickers. So we can add once again another deflicker. We can see here that it shows on the right that we have deflicker here and another deflicker, so we can change its settings separately. So we can add multiple deflickers. We can add a third deflicker, okay? But the problem is that the more deflickers that we add, it becomes, sometimes it makes the image slightly worse. So adding more deflickers is not always the best option. Okay, sometimes one deflicker is all that we need because it reduces the flickering, because also the rendering time becomes much slower. So if we use one deflicker, we can use time lapse. We can also change fluorolight and compare the results. So sometimes fluorolight can produce better results than time relapse. We can add another, for example, here, and fluorolight. We can see that some changes to the image is happening. In the fluorolight, the image looks slightly better in this instance. In other instances, this might not be true. The other tool that we can use is dirt removal. Now, automatic dirt removal can also drag and drop here, and it will reduce the dirt in the image, for example, but it's not always, okay, it doesn't always give great results. For example, we see here that actually added more dirt, okay? Now, this method can also be applied in Diffusion page by right-click on the original video. We can open a Diffusion page. Then in this location, we just press Shift space and we add deflicker. Now this will add this deflicker node here. We can change it to fluorolight, for instance, then add another by Control-C, Control-V. So automatically we add multiple deflicker nodes. Also, we can use the same method, dirt removal. Okay, dirt removal. Okay, and add a dirt removal node in this location. Now the goal here is just another method to add the same thing. We can see here that it's not always producing great results. We can see that in just a second, a dirt removal actually removed the hand. Okay, so it's not always effective. So this must be tested to see which setting is best. Now, like I've said, more deflicker nodes can make the rendering much slower. So it's also recommended to use a LoRA. That will make the consistency better. Now, for example, if I used this command prompt, okay, and used this negative, now the source images, they have green background, a simple background. That's even better because we can later remove this background easily and replace it with something that's suitable for us. Now, regarding the settings, we can use 30 sampling steps. Now, when we use a low denoising level, the number of steps generated will become like this number multiplied by this number, okay?
So I find this to be very useful because it helps in generating faster images. Now we can also change the settings to produce the same number of sampling steps from the settings. Okay, there's a setting for this, but it's not needed. Now for the seed, what we do is actually generate a couple of images, and when we see something that's suitable for us, we fix the seed. That's it. Okay, so we can make it 0. When we find a suitable image, we can fix the seed. The use of after detailer is very effective, okay, because it can draw the faces, because often without after detailer the face would not be so great. Now I would use inpainting with 0.3 in order to have this. Will make the inpainting faster, and it will make the inpainting better, okay, because we just want like a style transfer, and we don't want extreme resemblance to a certain subject or to a certain LoRA. So 0.2, 0.3 can fix the face better than restore faces and produce prettier results. Now regarding the control nets, now it's possible to use multiple control nets, but the more control nets that we use, the slower the generation will become. Okay, so I find normal maps and depth maps to produce acceptable results in general. Now, which control nets to use, that's entirely up to you. Okay, it's entirely experimental. In some cases, we might use tile, for example. If we use tile, this will reduce the details in the image and may help in reducing the inconsistencies, but we cannot use the tile preprocessor with starting from 0. Now, this is where when Controlnet will start taking control and changing the output. At a 20%, I find this to be useful, sometimes 30%, sometimes 40%, because I want the style to appear. If I started from 0, the style might get slightly affected. Now, we can use multiple control nets. I don't really think that using more than 2 control nets produces great results in general, but sometimes it does, so it's experimental. Sometimes we might use reference, where we want to a certain style to image style to affect the target image. Otherwise, we don't need to use reference. We can use normal maps with control pose. Now the control pose, now normal map produces like a 3D like structure of the image. Depth map, when we are interested about backgrounds and foregrounds, etc. Now in this case, my background is simple, so I don't need to use depth. Now for the open poses can be very useful in order to detect the fingers, the smile, the pose of the body, but in addition to that, the details of the face and the hand, for example. I'm using DW pose, which is open pose full, which is really reliable. Okay. Now, once we are done with the settings of one image, we go to the patch and set up, for example, the source and the destination folders, and start the generation to produce the full set.
Now, if we inspect the generated images, for example, here, we can see that from one frame to another, there is a good level of consistency. Okay, so even before we send the images to Davinci Resolve to convert them to a video, we can see that the level of consistency is very good. Now, it's advisable to always go through every single frame and check if there is a... So if we find a bad frame, we can remove it. We can also replace this frame with the frame before or the frame after. Okay, this depends on how many frames we have. So if we have many, we can simply just delete it and continue checking the remaining frames. Once we are satisfied, we can import this to Davinci Resolve and convert it to a video. It's very normal to get bad frames sometimes. This is why image to image gives us more control over every single frame being generated, because we can manually remove each frame, and this is very normal in video generation. Now we can also use the same methodology that I have applied in the previous video regarding consistent characters by using a special name, for example, like this, and providing a complete prompt. I'll be using the same settings, that is, I'll be using the same seed that generated the face in the previous, this face approximately, in the previous video, and we can run the batch processing once again. For example, using a photon checkpoint, using clip skip of 1. Now we can remove the background simply using effects, okay, by using something called keyer, by going to OpenFX key, 3D key, we just drag a 3 key down here and 3 key down here. Now, once it's we added the key here, we go to this location, open FX overlay, then now effects can be toggled. Okay, so we can, for example, we choose this, we click on this pen and just do something like this to remove the background. So this is it. We can see that there's a green color on the outside. We just change the spelling. Now the image is very smooth. We do the same for this image as well. Okay, and change the spelling. For example, up to 1. We can change the spelling up to 1 to make the image very clean. We can see now that in these images, okay, we can have something like this. Now we can add a background, for example, anything. Okay, we can add a background that is generated using stable diffusion, or we can add a background such as a city, for example. Okay, for example, in this here we can see that there's a small line here. Sometimes we can choose something like this, cropping. We can crop left or crop right. For example, here we can see that now we have the people or the girls with a real background or imaginary background, for example. Okay. Now, if we wanted to generate a video, for example, based on another video and have a dramatic change, for example, a person changed into a robot, then we need to increase the denoising level more, for example, 0.5 and up and more, and try to find a suitable setting. It's better if we use a LoRA. Without using a LoRA, it's very easy to get lost in terms of coloring or clothing. So it's better to use a LoRA in the settings. And because we are using a full body shot, we should use something like after detailer. For instance, if we generate an after detailer with this prompt, we can also use multiple control nets. In the control net, for example, if we generate this picture and it gave us this, we drag this picture, drag and drop it down here, for instance. Okay. So for the reference, we start from 0.3 or 0.4 in order for the style of the picture to take effect at a later stage, and use an openpose, for instance. I also want to point out that, for example, we cannot use a fat person to generate a slim person, or a slim person to generate a fat person, for example, or use different types of clothing. If we use different types of clothing, the consistency will become less. The source and the destination images should be relatively close enough in order to increase the level of consistency. Now it's useful to mention that we can actually use image to image also to produce deep fakes or face merge or something like this by using after detailer with a LoRA. If we use a LoRA inside after detailer and use a low inpaint such as 0.3 or 0.4, we can actually merge the faces together. If we put the denoising level down to 0, it will do something similar to deepfake. We can see the result here. For example, this is the produced result. Now this is it, and have a good day.